Okay, so this recording is initiated. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good early morning if you are actually too early morning if you are in the US. This is Abhivardhan from the Indian Society of AI and Law. Um, After some time, we are hosting a special session under the AI Development Committee. And this session is special because, unlike others where we invite startups and companies to showcase the use cases, here we are inviting real creators, people who are really in, the ecosystem of using Gen AI in creativity affairs of sorts. And I was thinking of this mashup of sorts in a conversational as well as a presentable way that let's just do this because this is kind of I would say, a sequel of a session because the first session we had was more around IP rights and cultural heritage. So we already had those views. Okay, we are an organization happened to be led by tech lawyers. So obviously we have had those conversations so often. But then you know what? Now we should move on as well and seek to find perspectives from the industry side. And then of course, it was a hard choice to make. We had invited people from different fora, sometimes in music, sometimes in others, but you know what? Sometimes schedule does not match for everyone, or else it could have been a fun conversation, graphics plus music plus. So, and yeah, I'm also happy to welcome Kailash, who is the chair of our committee and an intellectual property researcher from Delhi High Court. Very nice person. We can see him on screen right now. So, hi Kailash, can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Abhivardhan. Hello, Prateek.
Yeah,
Hi, Kailash.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I was
So,
just a little bit late.
not that much. So, I think we can take it forward well. So, no worries with that. So, I think we have the chair as well. So, I think nothing to say. I think we can do it in this way that a quick introduction to ISAIL as well before, because some people might not be aware. ISAIL, aka the Indian Society of AI and Law, is an AI industry forum which was incorporated in 2019, conceived in 2018. Why conceived in 2018? Because a publisher in Delhi reached out to me to write a book on AI and law. That kind of inspired me to form a network. And we started as a legal community, but now we are more policy inclusive and industry inclusive. So we're kind of an industry forum, only just in a coincidental way that it's happened to be led by tech lawyers. Yes, I'm the founder and chairperson, but beyond that, of course, we have uh, a small yet stellar team of people in the secretariat, from Sanjay Arora to Pavitra Manivannan and many others. Of course, most of them are lawyers, but yeah, we have a vibrant set of committees, and yeah, the forum has always been active in its own independent sense. Of course, if you wish to know more about ISAIL, you can go at isail.in at your convenience. And since I'm done with my boring introduction, let me introduce the people who are speaking. So we have Kiri, aka Kyrannio, if I'm spelling it correct, Kiri, and we have Prateek. So Kiri, yeah, and Kiri comes from Luma Labs AI. Luma is in the league of Midjourney and other such companies which are already in the Gen AI plus creativity space, kind of like Runway, kind of like what Canva offers in their own way. But Luma Labs' achievement is more around leveraging certain kind of techniques to come up with outputs which are unique in their own way. And as I introduced Prateek, Prateek comes from the Mumbai film industry of sorts, but he's a digital creator and a founder of something called Endofuturism, which I personally very like. Yeah, most of his work is known around the horror-related Gen AI art which he has done, but he sometimes also does certain good artistic creations like Rocketganj and many others. Prateek has been featured in certain art museums and always speaks in various, I would say, AI conferences and creativity related events. So it's good to have views from, I would say, Bombay and the US together. And let's see how this goes. So I think the best way we should start with is that, uh, so I think we can start with Kiri to begin with. So, Kiri, if it's okay with you, maybe you can begin with, unfolding maybe for 10 to 20 minutes about Luma AI, the recent updates you have had, because you have shared some very incredible aspects about the techniques which you have used. And I think we can start the conversation with that, and then we can, have Prateek in that as well. So, welcome.
Perfect. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. Right, that was amazing. It's very rare. But yeah, Kyrannio or Kiri. I'm going to keep my camera off so that I don't have any network issues, but really great to see you all. I think you're doing some amazing things at the intersection of AI and law and having great conversations, bringing in creative, doing some amazing work. It's also really cool. So I really appreciate everything you both do. Your outreach is amazing, and your company and your sort of community missions are pretty important right now. So thanks for your hard work. Over at I manage the creator program, and I came from a creator background myself. So I have a pretty good bird's eye view of what creators are up to, what they're doing, what their needs are, how they're applying a lot of these tools, as well as how I myself applied these tools. So with that being said, Luma just recently announced version 2 of our flagship product, Dream Machine. And it's a text and image to video model, which incorporates our foundational image model, Photon. And Luma aims to be a conversational creative partner where you don't need intensive prompting to get to the heart of what you want. You can speak to it in natural language. You can get images or videos from either images or easy to use wording. A lot of creative control and context goes under the hood into these models. So the models within your boards, you have these things called boards where you can create and organize your ideas in our latest version of Dream Machine. And those boards retain context as you prompt. So you can add to your stories in natural language, organize your ideas, and build off of them. You can also use a lot of text in your images should you prompt that, and the model has a very good understanding of exactly what it is that you're looking for. We recently announced last week on AWS reInvent, our CEO announced our next video model, our second version that will be coming out. I'm not exactly sure when, but it's called Ray. We don't have a release date just as yet, but you'll have even more creative control over your outputs. And Luma really aspires to be something easy to use for creators of all types, welcoming to new folks in the space, and ultimately wants to just give complex tools an easy to use interface. You can do product design, fashion development. It's not just limited to AI video. We really want to hit creatives in all industries, whether you're in architecture, cultural preservation, whatever that might be. These are tools that you can use to sort of brainstorm and pull AI into your process to enhance the human element rather than detract from the human element. So it's pretty nice that you have the abilities to modify and create and generate and feel as though you're having a bit of a creative assistant rather than a creative replacement. So I think I'd like to try it out. Feel free to find me on Twitter after at KYRANNIO. I can help onboard you to the if you all want to test it out and you're not sure how it works. We offer a lot of tutorials and support. You can get credits through the program. And I'm super happy just to give you guys like a hands-on breakdown of some of this if you're curious. So if you find that would be helpful, feel free to find me at KYRANNIO. And I'd be super happy to assist you all. Luma does a lot of care into the creative process for all creators and humanity and really wants to just see people do exceptional work with exceptional tools that make their life easier. So I hope that helps introduce some of Luma's current roadmap, some of the things we're working on and who we sort of are. And with that being said, I don't want to take up too much time. If Prateek should be next, or if there's more questions I should answer, let me know. I'm happy to. Sorry.
Sure. So I think let Prateek have his intro as well. I think that would be great. And then I can ask questions. And I think then we can start with a more meshed conversation.
Also, is Kiri's audio just bad for me, or is it still cutting out for everyone? I think we're still losing you in bits and parts, Kiri.
Yeah, felt a bit, but fortunately I was able to hear a bit. But yeah, it might have been a bit cluttered. But yeah.
Right.
So
okay.
I think the fault is from Kiri's side a little bit. Your audio and video is totally clear.
Maybe there's a network thing. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, no worries.
Connection issues, right? Okay. If my audio is fine, I'll just start. but I'm guessing your recording this and transcripts will be available, so it's good either way. Don't worry, Ki, either way. I think I got most of that. I'm sure everyone else did too. Okay, before I start, quick clarification. I'm not the founder of Indofuturism. That's just a sort of a genre. It's an emergent genre right now, which has been accelerated with just like proliferation of people making AI art recently. But I am talking about it. I'm pushing it. I'm a big believer in it, and I'm trying to get the word out about it out there, but also get the word Indofuturism out there. So thanks, Abhivardhan. That's very kind. I think it's just it's a community, and you know, I don't think anyone owns it, but yes, it's a big part of my work. I am okay. Like Abhivardhan mentioned, I live in Mumbai. I do work in the entertainment industry here. I am also an artist and digital creator. I've been using this new medium of AI art for about a couple of years now. I think I really got into it during the early days of the Midjourney beta in like July 2022. Doing a bunch of exploration since, with the specific goal of building on and creating work in genres in India that haven't been so visible, especially in mainstream culture, primarily. And it started with like a lot of science fiction, and then it's some science fiction, some horror, some fantasy, and this kind of newly emergent genre of Indofuturism, which I think is still finding its roots, and it's finding its tropes and aesthetics. But broadly put, and right now it's art and fiction, but I think it's like a bigger movement that's going to form around it. It is basically Indians thinking about the future and their role in it, and currently that thinking is happening through art and storytelling and fiction. But it's got implications, as I think Abhivardhan and I have chatted up, for in domains beyond entertainment and art, in like policy and in technology thinking, and just it's a cultural construct that's just emerging, and I hesitate to define it too much, because given India's diversity, it cannot and should not become a monolith that is dominated by any one sensibility, aesthetic, or cultural. But I'm excited to be one of the people at least trying to shape it. And I'm also very, very glad that it's happening here, and then maybe the world will find it, versus something that's created outside India and then kind of shipped back to us, right? That's also why I'm so vocal about Indofuturism. I think is one of the things that like accessible AI art has enabled, that a lot of storytelling, visual culture from India is now starting to get exported, versus the global entertainment industry telling the world what India is or should be, or like making content about, or making art about, making films about the future of India, and then kind of shipping that back to us, right? So I'm glad it's happening inside out, not outside in. And that is a bit of a rambly introduction to my work. I'm currently interested in building a community around some of this work, and seeing how this new wave of AI art and now AI filmmaking intersects with the existing entertainment industry in India, and what that enables. So that's where I'm at right now. Thanks, Abhivardhan, for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks, Prateek. And I completely agree. I'm so sorry it was saying you founder. It was more like I think everyone adds in to their own, because Indofuturism, I've been also a part of the creative groups in my own way. So it's kind of fun also to, seek unique perspectives in their own sense. Like
Of course,
somebody does
it's all good.
indie.
It's so early in it,
Yeah.
like that. It's no one really knows where it came from. It just emerged, so it's all good. No worries.
Yeah. So let's go ahead. Meanwhile, of course, we will be happy to take questions, but since we are here for something, let's do that all as well for fun. So, okay, I think we can initiate something on the creative process side of things. So, well, by profession, I'm a lawyer, but I'll not be asking quote unquote legal questions. I'll let Kailash do that for fun from an ethical standpoint, but I'll play more as an industry advocate of sorts than being a lawyer. So, um, so Kiri and Pratik, I think what I found interesting in both of your cases is that you have found your own niche in using these GenAI tools, right? And again, when it comes to because you both are associated with the graphics side. Prateek is a creator, Kiri is in a company which develops these solutions. So, uh, so one thing is, of course, I think the first important question which comes in our mind is maybe we can understand about the sense of artistic workflow. We could have asked with also the third person we wish to invite who was in the music side. But if let's ask from a creativity standpoint, what are your perspectives in terms of the artistic workflow and maybe also about how do you involve prompt engineering? Like I remember this on X, aka Twitter, that Kiri had shared something interesting about use of emojis in coming up with outputs, which is quite interesting to see how these models respond and understand. So when it comes to, I think these two questions can be clubbed together. That when it comes to your perspective of artistic workflow, number one, not specifically about how does the idea come. That's a different thing altogether because again, uh, that's a different question altogether. But on workflow and aspects of prompt engineering to begin with, what has been both of your experiences? Maybe we can start with Kiri and then Prateek can jump in. Yeah.
Sure, super happy to answer that. Prior to joining Luma and working with Luma more, I was a heavy power user of Midjourney. And I would spend many, many hours, far too many hours in Midjourney first to create images. It was my easiest way to see what was effective with prompting and quickly. I would just mash together a lot of random words, try to get the best outputs from that, and eventually start kind of exploring different tokens to see what the models would do. When Dream Machine came out, I started exploring emojis, as Abhivardhan had mentioned, and noticed that the emojis were giving stellar results. You didn't have to prompt long things. You could just give the one emoji and it would interpret that. I think that we haven't even scratched the surface of what prompt engineering is capable of. So I think that currently we're trying to make it super simple at Luma for anyone to prompt. We don't want there to be a barrier to creativity, but approaching it comes from a place of exploration. So I think as long as they're open-minded and exploring and just trying to throw anything you can out there, don't be afraid to experiment. You have image outputs, you have text inputs, you have a wealth of, sometimes you'll get these very unusual results and you're not even sure how the model is getting there, but just combining two tokens together can do that. And it's always just a process, I think, more than anything of exploration. So with that being said, I think when it comes to workflows are still a little complex. It's a lot of kit bashing. You have lip sync maybe available from this provider, and maybe here you have a service available from that provider, or editing stuff you have to take to a different program. You can't currently just dive into these things and edit, get something for lip sync, get your music, get your clips together and output it. You have to kind of go from every different direction for your content. So some workflows emerge where you'll see more complex, comfy UI workflows that are a lot more expert based, or in some cases, you'll see platforms trying to put everything together. And in Luma's case, we're trying to keep everything in your interface and organize it. A couple others are trying to find the ways to connect all of these pieces. But unfortunately, it is a bit of kit bashing, research and community sharing your prompts, sharing your tools, finding the people who are sharing this. Really important what Prateek is doing, trying to build the community around that too, because the community helps find these solutions while we're still early. And I think going into a mindset of how you want to work, whether that's image to video or text to video, and then finding your stack and exploring what works for you in an inexpensive or expensive, depending on how you want to go about things way, is still kind of a challenge. I wish that was simpler for people, but it is still challenging to find all the things you like in the ways that you like it and also get it edited. So hopefully we see some great strides in that direction soon to make the process a lot simpler. Sorry for the rambling answer, but hopefully that helps.
No, I think it's fine. I think it makes sense. Yeah, Kailash, I think you had something to say to add before Prateek chimes in. Yeah. If you're trying to speak, you can unmute yourself. No worries with that.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you go on. Go on.
So I would like to question from Prateek that how would you like to balance your artistic vision with the use of AI in your work?
So I think what we can do is then, since Prateek is anyways going to speak,
Okay,
I think.
even
So sorry
KV
to
can
interject.
answer.
Yeah, I think yeah, okay, sure. I think so. Let Prateek also speak up. Let Prateek also speak up, and then let Kiri do. So, sorry, sorry to interject
Sorry,
in the middle, but yeah.
what was your question? I didn't fully understand it, Kailash.
So the question was like, how do you balance your, artistic vision while using AI in your work? Do you have any specific approach, or you go through the traditional way, like
Okay, got
you
it.
work without AI?
No, that's good. I think actually this sort of ties in with generally this Abhivardhan's question about process and workflow and how you approach prompting, etc. Um, it's look, it's been now a couple of years that I've been using it, and generally in the popular imagination that AI art has started to become a thing, and now AI filmmaking's been around for as long, but now it's starting to get really interesting. But it's still so early that there is no one like prescriptive approach, and neither there should be. I don't think, for example, everyone, including Luma, is doing some really interesting experiments on trying to find even the basic, like the UI UX of this kind of creative workflow, which is very different in some ways from like how let's say production or art making of any kind works today. But that's always the case. Every time there is a new creative technology that leads to the creation of a new medium, it's a whole new workflow, right? And even within the evolutions of that medium, workflows change. Like we've gone from physically splicing together portions of film stock to edit, to now completely like fully disembodied virtualized editing. Within the history of cinema, there have been several such technological leaps forward or sideways and detours. And I think we are extremely early in the evolution of like let's say AI tools. For example, if you look at some of the major players, Adobe is trying to build these tools into existing workflows and existing programs like Photoshop. They already have generative fill features, or even now in Premiere Pro. Meanwhile, like Luma is trying to build an entire new stack and trying to experiment with various kinds of both input and output sort of mechanisms, and how they're created and how they're presented. Runway is doing something super interesting, and I think everyone's just trying to figure out. No one's really found it. So in the light of that, I think what that will keep changing, but what doesn't change is really your intention with trying to make something has to be where it starts to, so when you think about prompting, I think my challenge with the current, actually that's lesser now. About a year ago, it was very, very sort of, prompt engineering is this very hardcore skill, and it's kind of got this sort of esoteric kind of quality to it. I don't think it's like that. I think it actually is the whole leap forward with AI tools is that all of them are intended to be intuitive, instinctive, natural language, very human input based, versus having to learn a bunch of arcane terminologies. And I think that's really the big leap forward with these with this kind of creative tech stack at one level, that if you're able to express yourself in like simple text, you should be able to use them, and I think that's really the paradigm. So then all my time now goes in thinking, okay, why am I creating anything, and what do I want to say with it, and where do I want to publish it, and like, just why do any of this, right? Which is not different from any other medium. You want to make a film because you want to make a film for a certain reason. You want to tell a story, you want to say something, you want to elicit a certain kind of emotional reaction. There is a lot of intention behind making anything, and especially anything good. And I think we are finally reaching the early days of you know it's the early days of this scene starting to mature, where the excitement of new tools is kind of starting to not be enough. And just the hype of, hey, here's the new tool this week. Obviously there is a section of this scene where people are just still driven by that, and that's good. That's an experimental sensibility. But if you've been using AI workflows for a couple of years now, you're hopefully trying to get deeper and think about not just the tool and what it uniquely enables, but why do you want to do what it enables you to do, right? And that's been my journey. Initially, it was just, hey, new tool, let me experiment, let me have some fun with it, let me share the progress, let me share the results, let me have conversations around. This is now possible, and that still is continuing to happen, especially on the video front. Every week there is a sort of leap forward in like video video model quality. Luma just, I think, released something recently. So that's still happening. But that's, to me, now less interesting than saying, okay, all of this is now possible, and what do I want to use it for? And I'm waiting for broadly the conversation to go there, because I'm also like seeking that community where I feel like I'm being pushed to do better work versus, hey, look at my cool new gimmick, or like, look at my thing that I made with this gimmick. There's a lot of gimmickiness that I'm trying to get over, right? So my approach in this roundabout way is to not think too much about, oh, prompt engineering or the latest tool at all. It's like about why do any of this, right? What do I want to say with it? And yeah, that's my current exploration.
Great. So let's take the discussion of prompt engineering up further. There have been cases like uh, with some tools, when you give some input, the output of the AI tools have been sometimes come similar to the which is similar to a photo, or been someone a picture which has been taken by someone. So it in such cases, how do you take care of the issues of originality? There have been a huge backlash from the photography industry for the uh, against the AI tools that produce AI generated images. So, for example, there is a case in New Delhi High Court last week. It is PIL, which some people has filed a suit against a website, which its name is Image Bazaar, which stored images, which AI generated images that are alleged to be copyright infringement of the some models and celebrities. So maybe Kiri can answer this question. How uh, do you take care of your these issues of originality at your dream machine project uh, at Luma Labs?
Sure. So I just want to say I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't be authorized to speak specifically on behalf of Luma about that. But what I can say is, as my manager role as creator manager, is I try to encourage all of our users to make original and new things that haven't been made before. So just the storytelling component of, hey, what's something we haven't seen before? We don't need to think too much about what's already existing. Try to encourage people. This is a totally new form of expression. Anything you can imagine, you can see. So with that being said, like, there's really no reason for you to want to necessarily be super engaged to want to prompt a photograph when you could have anything, So the idea that we need to be pushing the boundaries of expression rather than sticking to the current ones and getting a community that really broadly around the world kind of understands that potential is a really good way to break ground in creating the new expressions behind this. Like, we're in a fundamentally new world for creative expression. What does that look like? We don't want to do the same things we've done before. We want to make excellent, new, imaginative, beautiful things together that are a part of a new era. So that's my personal philosophy. I'm not speaking on behalf of Luma on any of that. I couldn't answer to their legal department on that. I could find that information for you guys and pass that along, though. But I would say that just from a creator manager standpoint, I really try to get communities engaged in new and exciting ways to think about content.
Yeah, I think, that's perfectly fine, Kiri. I think, well, Kailash just asked it a bit early, which is fine. But I think uh, the larger legal debate and all of those things are already very saturated. But I think um, we might get there later. But I think, yeah, of course. I think to what Prateek said, I think if you wish to add on that person, if by chance because it missed out, I just thought you can complete that chain of thought. Up to you. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Uh, I hope I'm audible, right? To everyone.
Yeah, can
Yeah,
hear you.
you are audible.
Yeah. I'm so sorry if I lost myself in translation. So, Kiri, I was referring to you, if in case you can hear me. Uh, I think I think you were going to add also on to what Prateek said on workflows a bit if you wish to. But I think, anyways, I think then we can move on. I think it seems interesting because these artistic workflows, like Prateek rightly said, are more around at a very immediate stage, because right now I'm saying, okay, fine, there are 3 to 4 such components from different third parties. I'm utilizing them and then coming up with something. The one thing which will happen is that within 6 weeks, something new will come, which might be either affordable or not, whatever it is, or maybe more reasonable in its, quality or, expressiveness, let us say. And then I think the whole stack changes in, I don't know, not months even. I think it's weeks, right? Like, suppose if we have something called Adobe Firefly, and then we have, this whole suite of tools like Canva. Now, some people might rely on Firefly for its own features. Some people might rely on Dream Machine, but then again, some people might also rely on Runway, which is offered through Canva as a platform of intermediary of sorts. So it's very interesting that the whole stack is warming up, but it's not something which is necessarily quote unquote uh, long run, because it also depends as to how far we can see that. I think that is something which will be a grappling question for everyone. We all have to see it if we leverage these tools. I think it applies even similar in writing. Like, people used to rely on Grammarly, now it's diversified market. So that's definitely one thing. So let's now get on the question of, let us say, I'm clubbing 2 questions again, which is more around aspects of artistic vision, because of course the session is around creativity, and one minor part of it is about cultural heritage and new ideas. So let's get into that, because you've given some very good perspective on artistic workflows. I also have some points on something called FRAND commitments, which is, don't worry, it's not a horrific term. It's more like mixing intellectual property and competition laws. It's a fun thing, but we'll discuss that later, just for fun later. I don't want to discuss law because we discuss already too much law. So, okay, jokes aside. So I think this part, I think we can more, and of course now since we already passed some 20 minutes, if people have some questions in the midst, they can just type it out. We can check them later. So when it comes to, of course, prompt engineering itself is something which is developing. But in your experiences with artistic visions, like Prateek's journey, I know one side he does on horror, one side he does on, I would say, a sort of superhero genre. Then another I say see when it comes to, robotic figurines, which I really like. And one more which I am particularly interested in, those 80s and 70s vibe uh, creations, which I really love, like totally reminiscent of the 80s, Indian cinema of sorts. So these are like different aspects of artistic visions, like in a pool of so many things. So I think I'm starting with Prateek on this one, so that then Kiri can chime in. Uh, how do you really think these tools, to some extent, if you don't need to give an absolute understanding, but to some extent, how do they, blend in, and how do you get some satisfactory outputs? Do you really feel they are? It's not about prompt engineering, but more around the aesthete of it, the aesthetic sense, the resemblance it contributes to the larger pop culture and beyond. What kind of experiences you have in there? So yeah.
So you're saying, how do you get to something that you're happy with as an output? Okay.
Kind
I
of
think,
that, but yeah, yeah.
sorry, go on.
Yeah, kind of that. More like, how is it that your artistic vision itself evolves, right? Because artistic vision is not just about, okay, fine, I've just got one output and that's it. It's more around,
Right.
an artist always evolves, right? So I think that's interesting to understand from your end. So
Yeah, got it. And I think that's a really good question, because this medium is evolving so fast, and the culture around it is evolving so fast, and the impact it's having on culture has been quite sudden and quite quick, because it all gets distributed online. I think in that way it's unique. It's like anything born on the internet as a cultural movement amplifies and distributes itself much faster than previous. Like, it took, like, I don't know, decades for cinema to take hold as a mainstream art form. Anything born on the internet in the age of social media is just much faster. So what's that meant for me? I think, look, at a process, and not workflow, but let's say it's a very exploratory process still, because these are not how the tech behind this works, how the models work are, and they've gotten much better at like control, but they're not deterministic. They're still slightly probabilistic, right? So you're working in like the broad latent space of things you're trying to create. And maybe latent space is not the right word here. But there is a you have to how to approach it. Like, for example, it's slightly different from taking a photograph where you would pre-plan exactly every single detail, and then sort of set that up in a studio and take that photograph. And it's getting to the level of control with these tools. In fact, the recent most image models are now allow for a very high degree of control using prompting and visual. So, also prompting has become multimodal. Earlier, it used to just be text prompts. Now you can use text prompt plus image reference plus style reference plus all of those things, right? So you're finally getting to the level of fine-grained elemental control. But what's interesting is that in the early days, this was a way more exploratory medium, because the prompting wasn't like 100% accurate, right? So there was an element of, okay, you will have to explore a fair bit to get close to what you want. And that did two things. One, it just baked in this process of you have to iterate and explore a lot to get close to what you're trying to create. But also it built into the process a lot of unpredictability and like detours, right? So often I've seen with myself and many people I've spoken to that they would start exploring a certain idea, a certain piece of storytelling, something that they're trying to create. But in the process of doing that, given the slightly unpredictable nature of these tools in the early days, you would find things that are almost more interesting. So that DNA of exploration and let's see where this takes us versus, oh, we know exactly what we want to create and only do that, is I think very inherent to like specifically like AI created tools, which is, and you're now seeing like even Runways now, they did this demo of a almost exploratory storyboarding editing style tool where it's about going from one shot to the other, but they're also trying to think about what happens when you kind of branch it off in another direction. So I think that's very interesting in this medium, that there is a deep level of experimentation baked in even as the tools get better. So I'm like, it's funny because now people are starting to seek out, how do I capture some of the raw experimentation energy of the early days? And then what's happening is that, look, once you start creating and publishing online, so it's going in. But once you start creating and publishing online, given the fact that this scene is almost completely proliferated, all right, it creates this, not this competitive scenario, but it makes you question and sort of evolve your own work much faster, right? Because let's say when I started out, I was very interested in the idea of sort of really exploring basic archetypes and tropes of science fiction in the Indian context. Cyborgs that are in the Indian street or an industrial setting, etc. But then, then a lot of people are doing that. So then it pushes you to go deeper and deeper and more experimental and more exploratory with your work very fast. So, now I can't have the level of simplicity only that I had 2 years ago. So it's led to two things. Either people have really built a body of work which is more interesting, more diverse, in my opinion, much faster than they would do maybe in some other mediums, or they've kind of had really gone much deeper down the early explorations, and that's great. So what's happened as a result is that what 2 years ago was qualified as an interesting image just doesn't cut it anymore, right? The visual quality, the visual interestingness, the complexity of work has gone up much faster, but at a execution level, but so has it at a thematic, narrative, storytelling kind of concept level. So what's great of the nature of the sort of the whole AI thing is that tools are accessible, they work very fast, they allow for lots of rapid experimentation, iteration, prototyping, and you're publishing them very quickly in real time. So the whole ecosystem as a whole is evolving, like said, at breakneck speed, and not just at a technology level. At what people are doing, what artists are doing with it, I don't think I've ever seen an experimentation and evolution in any creative medium this fast ever. Not even with like previously digital art forms like let's say digital video on YouTube. It took years for the sensibilities of YouTube to evolve from people basically posting whatever video on YouTube or trying to mimic broadcast television but on YouTube, or trying to mimic short films but on YouTube, to the evolution of like what is now like Mr. Beast. It's not a format that existed pre-YouTube. It's not a storytelling concept or construct or archetype that existed pre-YouTube. But it took like what, 10, 12 years of massive YouTube experimentation to reach that hyper optimized, super attention grabby kind of, YouTube video format. That's happening with AI tools like, I think, 100x faster. And that's very interesting. So as a medium, it all propels you to be constantly experimenting and constantly asking yourself, okay, you can't be chasing every carrot, you can't be chasing every tool, you can't be chasing every trend. So you have to really think about what is the core of your own work. You have to find that center, otherwise you get lost in the noise. So I think in that way, I don't know if it is very competitive, not in the way that artists are competing, but attention on the internet is kind of finite, right? So it propels you and pushes you in like the internet pushes anything else, to really think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's leading to some really interesting, in a good way, sort of evolution of the medium. Yeah, I mean, it's early. I'm sounding probably quite rambly, but that's where we are. There's so much changing that it's hard to give one precise soundbitey headline about the whole thing, right?
I agree. And before Kiri chimes in, I'll give you an example. So the interesting, yeah. So the interesting cultural impact was, I think you had posted about that rocket-shaped lamp, right? So there's a lamp kind of like with small diyas. And I had remarked, I don't know, on your DM or something, like I think a long time back, I have said that, imagine that we have towns where people during Deepavali are inspired by your art and they actually sell rocket-like diyas. Like that's the second order effect or third order effect, right? I think, technically they're knockoffs.
That's okay. Actually, that's the goal with these. I'm actually speaking to some people to see if for like in time for next Diwali, can we actually prototype a few of these standing lamp holders? Because to me, that's why it's interesting. Like the imagery of it it's quite new, but it also feels very organic to the time. Like if I saw it, I wouldn't be that surprised, in the real world, because it just fits. To me, it just fits. And I think that's a whole other conversation, but that's also what the ability to visualize everything in a way that it's almost real and make it feel photorealistic, I think is meaningfully different from, let's say, even an illustration of something. And I think that's the other big leap forward that like AI image making is specifically enabling, because suddenly everything feels real. If it feels like a photograph, which is the crux of my work, and it's photorealistic, but it's not a photograph, it's still doing the job of making people feel like, yeah, okay, this can exist in the real world. What happens when this exists in the real world? And I think that's really the second, like you said, the second order effects of that are going to be tremendous, and we won't even see them in time, right? I already saw people trying to, when they prototype, let's say, products or artifacts using AI image tools, and they're already starting to 3D print them. They're already starting to do like manufacture them, and the time to market is like so condensed, right? And I think it does something interesting to culture when that happens, for sure.
Yeah. I would let Kiri add. I think she remarked something, and I agree with that. So please.
Sure. Yeah. So I also wanted to say too, going off of my comment earlier about the photos, in Prateek's case, he's actually making really unique products within those photos, not just like a photograph of like the sunset, which might be beautiful. He's ideating to reality. He's expressing his consciousness. He's pulling that in, and he's able to express in a way that seems aligned with his vision, that which he wants to see in the world. And that's a powerful tool, because you're making something manifested from your vision. You're able to ideate it, execute on it, and share that in a new method of visual communication to others. So in that respect, that's a very unique thing, because you're able to actualize that which otherwise might have seemed impossible. Essentially, Prateek's making the impossible possible with that. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about this movement and this culture, is we're defining a new speed in which our thoughts can become real and our ideas can become real. And the strange thing is that when we are aided by systems that can speed that up 10 or 100 times for us, we can grow, we can develop, we can become so much more than we've ever been before. And I find that really interesting and unique because we can solve a lot of hard problems that way. Just as an example, I have like one woman in my program who takes disaster zones where homes have been destroyed, and they come in and they use Luma's technology to rebuild architecture that's sustainable over that. So they take in that photo data and they can quickly build sustainable architecture and get disaster zones recovered much faster through this technology. I think something like that's incredible because that's taking years of time out of, hiring all sorts of different coordinated efforts, getting these NERFs, these Gaussian splats, these like volumetric scenes, being able to prototype that in. And even just Prateek's amazing work there. When you think about all the ways this can apply, we haven't even touched the medical field yet and what that might mean. So I think that as we continue to evolve and express and grow, we're also going to see this really interesting development of how this benefits us in our daily life, and our artistic expression will also become something that really aids in all these different areas we never really considered. So I look forward to that. One thing that strikes me is sometimes when you're creating with AI, to Prateek's earlier point, and it's somewhat probabilistic, it can guide you down a very interesting path, and then culture starts forming around that, which comes together. And I think that the idea is, if you were to talk to someone and try to express yourself, maybe you weren't understood before. Now you could be understood. Now you could get hints of what you're looking for and start pulling at different things. I'm Greek. I come from a Greek background, and a lot of ancient Greek art and pottery and these things haven't really had a refresh in recent years, right? Or maybe are just like ancient temples that would be hard to recreate as an artist. I wouldn't be able to draw it all out. But in Midjourney or in Dream Machine or wherever I'm going, I can pull those elements in and maybe infuse different pieces to them, or just reimagine what the Acropolis might have looked like, or take different elements of that and see that expressed through ways that I feel resonate more with me in today's world than maybe the ancient world. And that helps me feel closer even to my culture, to be honest, because I feel like I'm inspired by my culture and moving forward with it rather than forgetting it. So not trying to appropriate it. I'm just trying to and be inspired by it. So just wanted to say amazing points, Prateek, really great work. And yeah, hope that helps.
Thank you. Likewise. Big fan of everything you do, both individually and at Luma.
Yeah, and I think so. Let's take this forward again. So again, folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I think we've kind of dived in workflows and artistic understandings, which is good to begin with. And since we are there, I think Kiri mentioned about that how these tools generally do not necessarily cause an appropriative thing, but more like, okay, fine, we are using it. It kind of connects to culture. This is a thing which is also common on Indian Twitter, like Prateek knows it, which is why Indofuturism is getting its deserved praise. That whether it is indie, classic 80s, whatever it is, or a blend of our southern cinematic experiences or some cultural heritage experiences of any other time. The fun part with it is that somehow, in a funny way or in a reasonable way, it actually connects to anything futuristically we assume. And I think, that kind of reminds me of sometimes, on a funny note, sometimes how there's a trend that sometimes now I think it's more visible in Indian movies also, funnily, for example, that now people are trying to use these generative AI tools, maybe in the form of videos or maybe in the form of VFX or CG. I don't think they're reaching there. CG is a different thing. Maybe in VFX and others, they're doing it to resemble their own understanding of things. So their own depictions. I think recently in commercial, I've observed some of them, but I think in art cinema, it must have been a little more prevalent. Maybe Prateek can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, I think that's something which I've noticed. So uh, let's
Sorry,
now.
you cut out for a second. You're saying something you've
Yeah.
noticed, and then you said you should.
Yeah. So what I noticed was in brief was that these Gen AI tools are being leveraged in mainstream content, the OTTs and the movies and all. Now in India, I think it's more recent. I've not seen too many iterations yet. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna comment the movie name which I saw from the Deccan or something. I'm not gonna name that movie. They had such a terrible use of GenAI, but there are some good examples as well, right? That was in commercial cinema. That was not in artistic cinema. So I'm saying that the while in commercial, it is recent. I think in some segments of Indian artistic is being tried. So I think maybe that's why I referred you that maybe you can add a little bit more on that. It just pop up inside my head. So yeah.
Right. I don't. So I'm not sure, but I don't think like it's reached the production stage yet. People are using it for like for pitching materials and some storyboarding, concept art, world building for sure. Maybe for some production design, costume experiments, etc. I know of mostly it like in the Indian industry, people are using it for like pitch decks, primarily AI imaging, and now starting to experiment with AI video for pitch videos and sizzle reels. But I don't think it's reached a level with video where it can actually be in a film yet, unless it's in a stylized, some kind of montage, slideshow kind of section. The video is not good enough yet to actually replace like a shot in a film or a VFX in a film. But they are very sort of, you can slice and dice it and use it maybe something. So I don't know the specific example. And it's, I think this younger creators are using it across the board. I was at Film Bazaar just now, which is where a lot of sort of independent films, not the mainstream film industry of the various language film industries, but even there, a lot of people had used what was clearly AI photorealistic or cinematic imagery for their pitch decks, for their catalogs, for their and that was great because there was such a diversity of films, right? Of various settings, characters, geographical locations where these films were at, and the kinds of characters and protagonists, that they were trying to feature. That was, and it was good because you could now see a lot more of them. I think 5 years ago, a lot of it would have been like, either you have references, and sometimes there aren't enough references, especially for Indian films, because there's so much new, and our mainstream films have been very limited in their palette and there's a visual sensibility. Now even the mainstream films have become very visually experimental, but for a long time, if you had to reference an Indian film in a certain genre that hasn't been popular, you really couldn't find much references. So I think the one big unlock for the current entertainment industry is that now they can do a lot of pitching, visualizing, pre-production for all kinds of films to a level that wasn't possible pre-AI. I think, and that will keep progressing to a level where you will be able to now the AI video tools are good enough that you can take those pitch images that you would put in a PPT, make them, animate them, make them video, turn them into kind of a pitch video and not just a pitch deck. And at some point, it'll be good enough where you can actually just produce the film, right? You don't need to like your pitch material. You don't have to do pitching, and then you can just make the film, and the cost of production will go way down. But it won't replace. I don't think it's going to replace anything, especially in India, because we have a very still. I think we are one of the few major entertainment markets in the world where we still have very strong star fandoms that are like half the draw of any big film, right? So I don't think that's going away anytime soon. But what you will see is that mainstream film will start using GenAI more and more. What's more interesting to me, though, which in just kind of to think about, is like digital video. When digital video came, it did not replace Hollywood, right? It became its own ecosystem. That now that ecosystem lives primarily on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, etc. Similarly with GenAI, I think, but digital video did impact production. People do use digital video cameras in productions of all kind. The techniques of digital video, the sensibilities of digital video have found there were many shows on, like, especially the newer streaming shows. You can see that the aesthetic sensibility has from digital video has leapt into like long form content. Similarly, I think as GenAI tools proliferate, and some of that is already happening, they will start getting used by the existing establishment of art and entertainment and all kinds of production. But it will also be like this separate ecosystem where people will be making fully kind of GenAI-led creative outputs, and that will be like its own ecosystem. Much like YouTube is an ecosystem to itself, GenAI creativity is already kind of an ecosystem to itself. So I think that's where I feel like it'll have more of a cultural impact, because in the existing things, the stories will not necessarily change even if they use GenAI. What's more powerful is that people who weren't getting to tell stories will now be able to do that directly without having to move to a major city where there is a film industry and having to operate within that mechanism and fit that ideology, that sensibility. They don't have to do that anymore. They can just tell their own story that is completely original, completely their own expression. And I think that's more interesting for me to see evolve as an ecosystem. And given the fact that we are still very early in this is more India specific, given the fact that we're still quite early in the growth trajectory of the Indian entertainment ecosystem as a whole, so for example, what do I mean by that? I think we have a lot of people who just still don't watch even one movie in a theater every year. We are still onboarding people into the internet economy and then into streaming. So it's the early growth phase of the Indian entertainment market. As a result, a lot of very mainstream projects dominate the conversation. A lot of very mainstream genres dominate the conversation. But I think in 10 years, it's going to be dramatically different in a good way. It'll be a lot more diverse because technology, that's been the trend, right? First, it was digital video, and now with AI, you will have all of these new voices that will, one, create from where they are, but some of them will also come to Mumbai or Hyderabad or Chennai or Kochi, and then they will join the industry. So I think in India, especially with GenAI specifically, it's going to have a huge cultural impact, probably more than anywhere else, where there are more evolved and developed entertainment markets. So for example, Hollywood has 5 generations of great IP that they just can keep making infinitely over and over again. Some of that is happening. So it's harder and harder for new stories to break through. But in India, it's kind of the opposite. It's a blank canvas. It's a white space where there are certain big tentpole movies, franchises, etc. But there's a huge audience that maybe doesn't connect to it and is looking for something new that's organic and that's homegrown. I think that's really where, when it comes to the current industry, GenAI creativity will have like the most impact.
And quickly add on that, I think maybe I'll ask Kiri to, chime in on this as well, because I think this is a very interesting, the whole set of points you made very interesting, because the one thing which has been under discussion also about, leveraging creative art into having more, modern Indian comics, apart from the Amar Chitra Kathas of the world or Diamond Comics, the Chacha Chaudhary time and all that stuff. So I think that's also a leap which certain segments of Indian cinema people are trying to do, that I'm aware of. So yeah, that's unique to see, because in some way or the other, than any other successful commercial or, let us say, artistic work could be comic booky of sorts, where you can leverage AI tools and then create, subtleties of different narratives, maybe in comic book forms, maybe in something else, maybe, I don't know. So that's just popping out of my head, but I'm not going to do that more. So, but Kiri, on what Prateek said about even the Indian industry and the Hollywood, do you have something to add? But because I think you might have something from your understanding and experiences. So please, yeah.
Sure. Me, right? Or did you ask that to Prateek? Okay.
No. To you. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Sorry, I didn't want to be talking about. Yeah, so funny enough, in my former life, my job just before Luma, I actually worked for a documentary film company, relatively major one over in LA. I won't disclose which one, but we did a lot of major documentary films for Netflix. They're working on quite a few big ones right now, a few top 10 ones, and they're mostly like historical, current news docs. And one of the things, to Prateek's point, that we spent the most time on was pre-visualization of the shots. If you have a documentary scene that takes place at a historic location, you're often going to be trying to figure out what furniture you want in the shot, how much you're going to rent, what looks good, what doesn't. Is this color going to distract when we have a close-up in this old art gallery in Europe, or is this going to be a problem? And when you're putting in these orders for these various shots and you're trying to visualize that, it's extremely hard to do that quickly and on budget, unless you're using GenAI tools. Then you can just magic edit in the generalized things in your shot. You're not going to be wasting money on something. You're going to know exactly what crew you need. You're not going to have 2 weeks of sitting in Zoom meetings trying to cut out images of a chair and imagine it here and imagine it there. So GenAI can speed up a lot of those tedious little things that oftentimes can take a lot of time. And I think that over time, you're going to see GenAI applied in not just top to bottom in the stack, but in other areas where you can speed up the weeks of just meetings that could just take place over like an afternoon in Midjourney. And I think that will also be huge for larger teams as more people start collaborating on this. I think the democratization of creativity is going to be amazing and exponential, and is something that everybody should be given the chance to create and share their vision with. And you will see that explode. I did work in OTT for a while as well. And I think that when it comes to advertising for OTT, funny enough, that's also going to be huge. They need GenAI to create the ads to fill the ad slots. If we have so much content, we don't want to be seeing the same ads over and over and over again. That gets very annoying. It's a horrible user experience. But if the ads were actually quite interesting when it came to GenAI, and it was something that wasn't the same ad 6 times in a row for like Mattress Firm or something, you're going to get more viewers, you'll get more revenue. The more content you make, the more revenue you can touch, the more your viewers are happy if they have great content plus great ads, and everybody kind of wins. So I think that that's a keen area to keep eye on, especially is the CTV industry specifically. And I think that'll be awesome for India too. I really look forward to what you all will do, especially because OTT enables us all to see more of that content even here. And we can trade that a lot quicker with some of these platforms. I'm not sure what like Netflix and the likes plans are, but it's a cool global stage that we can all see what everyone creates and all be fans of, regardless of where we are. It's not siloed anymore.
Yeah. Sorry for being a bit deflected. There were some points which people were saying on the comments as well, so I was a bit enamored, but I was clearly listening. And yeah, I think the references you've made are quite good. So before I move on to the next segment, I think I'll have Kailash's intervention in the end, so that maybe some big points around policy could be discussed, not necessarily legal positions, but I think I'll just keep it at the end because we were more interested in the exploitation part, which we have done. So I think
Sure.
now what we should discuss, because I think what's maybe more interesting is that since we are left with policy points, either we take up some questions on the creative sides, which we have discussed, and then get into policy, which would be fun to do. And then I think it could be good. So, yeah. So let me see. I think we have some ISAIL members as well. We have Sumant G from Hyderabad. Uh, he's somebody who has a very interesting background in law and otherwise. We also have Sanjana was here, but yeah, Sanjana is also here from ISAIL. We have some other people as well, Bahadur Shah and others. So, of course, uh, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask him because after this, I think we might get into a bit of a rumbling and interesting side. But again, to be very fair, if my position on this is that uh, the idea is to have a blended perspective rather than to just give a contrarian perspective. So I'm not that party, so I'm making it clear. But yeah.
Yeah, I think questions would be interesting just given that we're an hour in, and I feel like between, and Kiri, correct me if I'm wrong, we've covered the big buckets of like process, workflow, what it means, where it's going, evolution, etc. And I'm seeing some interesting, activity in the chat. I feel like specifically, there's one thing that I maybe would be interesting to discuss with Bahadur is shared. And if you want to kind of even jump on and have this conversation with me, I'm happy to do it. Basically, I think this whole question of Bahadur, do you want to like share the question, or how do we? Is everyone seeing this point about?
Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name is Bahadur, and I'm also a lawyer, who has interest in tech and IPR. So,
Nice to meet you.
usually from an IP perspective, like what we have noticed is, there's this tendency, right, to the way the protection itself is granted or how we view art itself depends on, the kind of relationship between the artist and the art. There's a high degree of skill involved, and there needs to be a lot of control over the process itself, right? But for AI, what I've noticed is it kind of seems to, and honestly, like Abhivardhan says, like I really want to give it the more optimistic and more widespread positive view. But the thing is, to me personally, it feels a lot like it's a bleak perspective, right? You take a lot of content, which a lot of artists or environmental influences, etc., from the data sets, and these technologies can, immediately mimic, these kind of aspects, right? And there's a lot of exploratory process also involved. But I feel like the whole concept of artistic, like even with computer generated work itself, some people program the aspects of work, or you're using Photoshop or you're digitally manipulating this. But I feel like where is the level of human, like the human involvement, the human aspect is significantly reduced, right, when using these kind of works, because you're essentially putting in some prompt inputs, and in the end, there's some mystery that's happening inside, and you get output back. So the and it's not great output either, right? At least in the beginning stage itself. So a lot of creatives, I feel like, have been raising concerns, and there are widespread concerns about how this technology would even be adopted in these circles, right? Who is using it and what they're using it for? That's what I wanted to like really understand. And Prateek, even hearing your conversation about different aspects, how the people in the industry and artists are using it, I feel like it was a more hopeful perspective, regarding like new kinds of use cases popping up and people exploring this. But my question is, uh, there's a bit of challenge in bringing people forward and making them believers in the artistic process involved in AI, right? I mean, it should present some those kind of how do I say this? Uh, it should present a way out, right? Like people should feel hopeful about adopting it. So that's my question. How do you address that?
So there are a few, I think that lots of important sub points to that question. But I'll start from the last thing you said. For people to feel hopeful, and like a part of this thing is why we have conversations. I think everyone from various domains is trying to have conversations. Like Abhivardhan's put this together. Uh, like yesterday, day before, there was another panel which like India Today had done, and then so there have been this year. I think the broad impulse has been this is happening, and let's try and make sense of it. So everyone who's involved with this, either the technology side or the application side, is I think spent a lot of time this year just having conversations. Some have done it via podcasts, some have done it by going on like television shows, some have done it via panel discussions, some have done it there on their own social media via reels. So that's the curve of anything new, right? There is a lot of conversation that needs to happen. And I'm glad that in India, it's not happening 5 years after the world has moved on. It's happening in real time. And I think that's usually not been the case. But I think we have now a critical mass of young people online who don't want to be left behind with anything and are kind of really proactively engaging with something. So I'm glad that not only are we having it at the same time as the world, we're probably having it more and maybe with a more of an open mind than like lots of places where sensibilities and ideologies are more settled around technology. Definitely like in the US, there seems to be a much more of a binary about this stuff. Whereas what I'm seeing here is that there's a lot more of a, like a spectrum of conversation. It's not, this is bad or this is good. It's like, this is a highly context based, use case based conversation that needs to be had. So that's one. I think to how do you get people involved and hopeful? You talk to them, you bring them into the conversation, you talk about the genuine concerns and fears, because there are many, and many of them are justified. It's a highly disruptive time in the world, not just because of AI, but just because in the world. So I think the worst thing to do is just kind of, for any of us involved, and especially, having made this a part of our lives, to be almost broadcasting and this is our opinion and this is the right thing, versus having conversation. So I'm glad forums like this, the one Abhivardhan has created here, exist so we can talk. In terms of, I'm also going by the text in the chat, right? I think this is a commonly said thing about AI, art, filmmaking, design, sculpture, graphic design, whatever, and a commonly said thing, and it's a common misconception that the AI does the work. What do you do? It's like saying when you're making digital art, your fingers are clicking a mouse and then it's just happening. You know what I mean? We're forgetting that all of this needs human agency, human intention, human sensibility, aesthetics, and I think it's become, and unfortunately, even within the AI community, it's become this kind of trendy thing to say. I don't know why where hey, taste is the new skill and the whole thing is curation. I completely disagree. It's a ridiculous notion, and some really prominent people have said it. No, it's not. It's a skill. It's just a different kind of skill that is still, people who are practitioners are still figuring it out. So how can we expect everyone to codify it and present it in this really structured way of their own talk about, look at me, dude, I'm still trying to like search for words sometimes to talk about my own process, because even though I've been doing it for 2 years, it's still so early and so much has changed, right? It's like saying that you can't write a book on screenwriting 2 years after cinema has been invented. You know what I mean? It's go look at the early scholarship around film. It's so exploratory and fundamental, and some things have not changed, but so much around theory, film theory, has emerged after the medium had been around for a while, and there had been people studying it for years or decades, and there had been practitioners with entire careers spanning over a lifetime with their body of work, then them kind of looking back, okay, this is what film actually is. You don't have it like, and there were early theories, of course, like the famous Eisenstein's famous theory of the montage came out quite early, but you don't get to Interstellar with just Eisenstein's theory of the montage. You know what I mean? It's the rudimentary theories are there today. So, and here's the thing, right? This is kind of every time there has been a new creative medium, especially ones that have been enabled by technology, there has been this, okay, what are you doing? Is the machine doing it? It's not this just now. It was also happening at the invention of photography, where people were like, oh, you just press a button and you're going, a lot of painters didn't love the fact that photography was invented in the early days, because a lot of the function, the function of painting was to just make portraits of people so that they can have them for like posterity, for emotional reasons, for family reasons. And here, rightly so, they were worried that it's going to affect some of that. And it did. It did. There was a transition period when people just started making photographs, the early photographs, versus hiring painters to do the portraiture, right? But portraits didn't go away. Some of the most famous paintings of all time are still portraits. But also something interesting happened in that time. And I hope I'm getting the timeline of this right, but almost as a response to photography and what it enabled, like painting felt, and I think I read this, that painting felt, someone specifically said this, the name is escaping me, what painter this was, that painting felt unshackled. They were not confined to their sole purpose of making portraiture. They could do so much more in that time, right? Like a lot of painters felt like, okay, now we can do more. And sure, sort of various kinds of painting existed for a while, but the invention of photography had some profound effects that were only visible years later. And again, with the invention of cinema, and it's funny, even within the transition from silent films to sound, there was resistance. From the transition from black and white film to color, there was resistance. And that's just the case. It takes a while for the process of a new medium, especially a technological medium, to be understood, codified, and then spoken about. And here's the thing. Every medium is technological, right? Technology is not something that is only like computers. Everything is technology in a way, if you go as way back as you'd like to go. So I think we're in that phase where there are certainly processes. There is a lot of craft involved. There's a lot of skill involved. But even the people in the scene are not able to always codify their own workflows because they're still experimenting. And that's where we started, right? In the spirit of experimentation, there is a reluctance for anyone who's a practitioner. I'm a practitioner. For me to say, I figured it out. This is my process. This is how image generation works. This is how AI video works. You can still say that to some reasonable degree about, let's say, film today. Sure, there are experimental films, and even mainstream directors experiment with that thing. But you broadly know how the various components of that production workflow work. You broadly know what emotional effects are elicited when you take a beautiful montage from Dune and Hans Zimmer creates a beautiful piece of music for it, right? You know how the medium works and how to get to specific goals in that medium much better than you do today for GenAI, because it's still forming. It's still early. And so it's an understandable thing that people think that is, it's just curation. It's just like, just a few words. It's just that the skill isn't visible yet. It's very, in some ways it's a very conceptual art form. So it's a lot of thinking involved. It's a lot of like narrative, storytelling, world building you will see with so much AI work, because when making an image is faster, that's not enough. It's not enough for the audience. It's not enough for the artist. So people are not just generating images. They're creating entire fictional worlds and alternate realities and like like montages of things that never. So all new art forms are emerging from it. All new kinds of formats of art are emerging because now generating an image is easy. It's not enough. The baseline expectation of what qualifies as good has gone way up, right? So it's when something's evolving so fast, people are just, I'm busy making. I mean, I don't want to necessarily sit down and like codify my process just yet because it keeps changing. And I still do that. I have like a notebook that I keep of what I'm learning about my own sort of brain, about my own process as I experiment with these tools. But it's too soon to sort of say that there's no process. And even just there's a couple of misconceptions there also. Like, for example, text prompting, you write 4 words and then you get the input. That's not been true for a long time. Anyone who's really seriously using these tools are kind of doing multimodal prompting and a lot of editing. So you may be prompting with the image, you may be prompting with text, you may be prompting with a hybrid, you may be prompting with multiple images and text, and then editing it, then upscaling it and using the upscaler to give it a different dimension. So, and then when you take it to video, image to video, then you're adding 4 levels of a video workflow to it. So already people who spend a lot of time doing this are using upwards of like 7, 8, 10 steps and sometimes 4, 5, 6 tools to achieve these outputs. Whereas 2 years ago, people were like, okay, I'll go to DALL-E in Midjourney and write robot in Bombay. So that's moved. But people don't know that's moved because everyone's busy creating and not saying, look at our process. You know what I mean? And that's the creator's impulse always. You just want to make. You don't want to keep justifying what you're making because what is the world going to say? So hence, there is a big information gap as well as like an understanding gap, right? In time, that will get solved, but that's where we are right now. And that's where it's just curation. There is no skill. It's just, like compiling where that perception comes from. I hope that answers your question to some level.
No, Prateek, that was really good. I feel like that answer, kind of converted me from the skeptic side of things. So really nice to hear that. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that as well. Yeah.
Chalo, that's good to know. That's good to know. Well, but at least I am more in a neutral position, but I'm joking. But anyways, I think, Kiri, would you like to add quickly on what Prateek said? If you wish, I just also wanted to have you chime in. But yeah,
Sure.
it went.
Yeah, sure. I'll add in quickly. I just wanted to say too, what you're building here at Abhivardhan is like so important. Getting all this community together, getting folks to talk about how they feel, different perspectives. What you and both Prateek do with all of this. My hat's off to you too. A lot of respect. It's a huge time. It's a big shift. A lot of people are scared or confused. So there's not clarity. So to have these conversations and to get everyone on the same page and just to kind of feel out the future is really cool. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this and genuinely build that bridge. I think to Prateek's point, it's interesting because it is a bit of a workflow problem currently. Like what we do with Dream Machine, for example, is like you can design products first and then go out and make them. So maybe you could design a piece of pottery that you like to see. It's kind of like your pre-visualization. And then I could go out and I could find the ingredients to build that piece of pottery. Or maybe I could design a shoe or a renovation I want to see. And then that informs me of like, oh, before I spend all that money painting my living room, that might look horrible. I'd rather not do that. And from that respect, it kind of becomes more of a feedback loop where you're using this to imagine something and then you can create it in real life and you're not spending and wasting time and money. And then you do have every element of that process. So it just depends how you want to apply the process, really, whether that's engineering, product design, even the medical field. You could visualize cells. We could visualize how cells may look under different types of stress or disease, or how we could possibly get better technologies, or just, that idea of taking a different domain and applying this loop or this technology hasn't been fully fleshed out yet. So I think once we see these applied to different domains, just outside of even what we do now, the opinion may change and people may start to really realize what Prateek is saying is that it's not just a collection of words, it's more just a collection of ideas that you build into these alternate realities. And those may exist for medicine, those may exist for architecture, those may exist for fashion. And we have one woman in our program who helps design some of the spacesuits for like NASA and SpaceX. Like, think about how you can use this technology to imagine what that might look like or how the future looks. So I think that the fear that it kind of is just a curator or a replacer, maybe It's more of a, this is more of a tool you can use to imagine what you want to see in the world before spending a lot of money to do it and not liking it. Like, and Prateek has the chance to imagine this beautiful Indo-futurist sci-fi society without having to spend billions of dollars to do it. And that's pretty special because then he can inspire others through his vision, and that brings a bit of a firestorm to any idea, and it starts to speed up a lot faster. So ideas propagate quicker, and then commerce propagates quicker, and then we can help each other. And I hope that people see that point of it, but it does take time just to have the conversations. So yeah, that's my ramble. Sorry.
No, I think that's a great addition. So I think it's good. So now before I mean, Himanshu has also given some really great comments in the chat. So I really appreciate that. Shout out to you, buddy. But yeah, before I let Kailash have his interventions, one quick point because I mentioned the beginning, and this discussion kind of revolved around. So interestingly, I think uh, leveraging the workflows is something which is a problem everywhere. Prateek is referring to the creative side. The creative side is one segment, the marketing advertising workflow segment is another. And both of them might not be in the same alignment. Similarly, if we compare these two to something called biotechnology or law, where law management is there, like people are just using and leveraging tools, it's still not working out. I think this whole churning is, anyways, agnostic. But the whole purpose of the session, I think most of it is achieved. That we have kind of discussed the churning around. I think that's something I wanted to add. But yeah, for a quick comparison for 1 minute, I'll just show you this for fun, all of you. So um, I think the thing which we were discussing on workflows, like what different ecosystem tools we need or components. I call them ecosystem components because it kind of makes sense terminologically. So let us say there's a comparison. Just for fun, I'm not going to explain this in detail, but just to confirm. So Kailash, I think the screen is visible, right? If I'm sharing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. So a simple comparison. I'm comparing two different sectors which are not the same. I'm comparing marketing, which is a completely different thing, to biotech, which is more related to medical research or genetic research and all that stuff. Now, if you see that there are ecosystem components, so leave the regulatory part. I'm not getting on that. Not ethical is one thing, but if you see data sources, AI models, integration platforms, visualization tools, there is some eerie similarity, but it shows that all of these, how much importantly they become a part of their own workflows. I just showed it for the larger audience, also for Prateek and Kiri, but those who would be watching this later, they can just keep this table in their mind if they wish to know. I'm not saying they'll remember it, but you know this was just a 1 minute demo. So I think what's going to happen in the future is that whenever the FRAND commitments will be happening at an industry level, when we see that the workflows are saturating in a stable way, they're economically viable as well as practice-wise sensible to be standardized, then I think we'll see some patterns. But I think right now it's not the case. But I just showed that table for fun, for just a holistic perspective. So I'll stop sharing. So folks, again, you can add questions. We have some time left, so we'll manage it out quickly. But yeah, Kailash, I think now you can have interventions. I believe you can be a bit explainable, and then you can add up, and then I think Prateek and Kiri can, intervene. So yeah.
Okay, sure. Like as Prateek has said earlier, that in India there is a huge room for the development of music and film industry using AI applications and AI tools as compared to other countries where there are already dominant player present. So I will keep my question simple. What uh, role can policymaker, government play to promote this whole process or to nurture this industry of using AI in the film and uh, music industry? Do you believe you believe like this policy, this rule, or this you know direction should be in place that would help the music and the film industry to grow?
Is that for me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe you can begin,
yeah.
Prateek. Up to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, look, from and I'm sure there's something like this already in the works, but both awareness and access is sometimes just enough, and awareness of, okay, what are the various tools available, but also like a one level deeper, that how they change all aspects of creation. And I think the younger we can take that, so it's already people, I think college students know it, school students are starting to know it. And if we can find, if I don't, maybe there's a program that does, like there's like a government program that does that, but I think the messaging has to go out that these things will meaningfully impact change, uh, maybe even disrupt some sectors of production, and hence specifically some roles and specific jobs within these sectors. And I think, so one, it's important to spread that awareness that you can now use these tools and how you can use them, but also identify maybe, and that maybe that's more the responsibility of stakeholders in the industries and the major companies, to identify what parts of their employee pool are likely to get affected, potentially disrupted by these tools. Are there chances of redundancies and sort of obsolescence for certain roles, and make sure that that transition phase is handled well. Upskilling is the obvious answer to that. Upskilling, reselling, lateral transfers, moving people up the value chain, letting, empower all of that. And I know it sounds easy, and it's a much more complex and probably an expensive challenge if you're already a player, but I think that's one. And that sort of, that communication all the way from the top is, I think, will be helpful. That, look, we need to broadly be aware that this is happening and help people reskill and partner with the right companies to help do that reskilling. And then the other thing is just in terms of access. So right now what happens is that some of these tools can get, if you kind of add them up all together, all the subscriptions can get quite expensive. If you are using 5 to 6 to 7 tools, which sometimes you might need to use for an overall AI-led workflow, it can run up into the hundreds of dollars a month, right? Each of them are in the $10, $20, $30 a month subscription individually. And I know that some of these tools are trying to solve that by, in that same $30 or $20, become the entire workflow versus becoming part of a workflow. But right now you can't get away from using like 3, 4, 5 tools. It's very expensive. Most of them are denominated in the USD and priced for those markets. They're not very India sensitive prices. And hence access is a challenge. And even those who are able to, because they feel that they must, are spending a lot of money every month on subscriptions. So I think that if there is and some of that will just be solved by the free market, as it should be. I think there will be Indian companies who will realize that kind of need and pricing gap, and fill that gap by more cost-effective, competitively priced solutions for the Indian audience. But I think also a lot of the international companies that are building these tools will realize that you need to do pricing adjustments for India, which is also going to happen very soon. It's happened with everything else. It's happened with, like, for example, like streaming subscriptions, etc. in India. There's a little bit of a price adjustment for the Indian market. But I think where at a policy level it might be helpful is that how do we get a lot of, especially young people, especially kids in, like, let's say even middle school, using these tools? Can we enable, like, so I really love this new program that's been announced, One Nation, One Subscription, where I think the government has partnered at like a sort of a overall level with the 4 or 5 major publishers of academic journals, and making it available to all students and research. I think that's going to be, once implemented, it's going to be like a game changer, quantum leap forward for Indian research, right? It's going to, and not just existing research, but interdisciplinary research, right? It's so good. So I think some version of that, where, let's say, there's a program to give subscriptions to LLM chatbots, AI image tools, AI video tools, to kids in like middle school, and sort of train them in this new workflow, which is very different from how any creative workflow works today. The human principles of art and creativity and storytelling are the same, but the tools are very, very different from how, even in college, if you're a film student today in any film school in India, you're probably learning to make films in a very different way. Now, if you're enterprising and if you're spending any time online, you've already known that all of that is going to change. and they're doing it. But at a policy level, can we accelerate these access to these tools? Can we subsidize them? Can we do partnerships in the way that One Nation, One Subscription has happened, where these tools can be made available in a much more affordable or a free way to large groups of students, especially? I think that's going to be great. I think that would be amazing, honestly. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think yeah, completely. And One Nation, One Subscription is just fantastic because, okay, one concern only it had was that the government is spending too much, but it's fine. I think it's kind of like the UPI of accessing research of sorts in a casual sense, if I'd say. So it's actually a game changer. I mean, for interdisciplinary and even my field, law. But yeah, even otherwise for anyone, I think biggest barrier we have had is people have the skills, but they don't have access to resources. I think that's a huge problem. So something similar. Okay, there's a question finally. Okay, but I'm out of my home. Can you... Yeah, sure. You don't need to open your camera. Just speak up. So, folks, you don't need to necessarily open your camera. Okay, you have a question. Prateek, the question is for you and Kiri as well. But yeah, can GenAI ever achieve true creativity, or is it merely mimicking patterns? Blah blah blah. Well, I mean, I think it's more like if we have a public square of original content, and these tools are analyzing to what extent do we say that it's saturated or not. I think that is a very chicken and egg question, but I think I'll let Prateek add his views and maybe Kiri, but I'll not say anything because I'll play devil's advocate here.
I think I've already yapped too much, so I'll let Kiri start here. I think people are bored of listening to me.
I agree. I agree. So please, Kiri, please, yeah.
No, you didn't yap too much, Prateek. That was amazing. Also, too, if you guys ever have any of these programs, or if you have things that we at Luma can maybe help with as far as like access or upskilling or education, please reach out. Let me know how I can help there. I'll put my Twitter handle in the chat here. Oh, shoot. Hang on. I have to space it out. But why is this? Okay, I'm just going to type it. I can't do that. Sorry. Here's my email too. Especially because I'm trying to focus more on education and seminars and free things and like tutorials, whatever you guys need, just let me know on that front. But going to the question that was asked, this is my personal opinion, so I want to separate that and divorce that from Luma for a minute. But I think that human consciousness is special to humanity. And I think that so long as we possess consciousness, and we do, I don't think there's ever anything in the world that can mimic that, because consciousness is so hard to define and it's inherently creative in a lot of its expression. I think that generative AI can achieve creativity in very emergent and unique ways. I've seen sparks of it here and there, but I do not think it will ever be at the same level or replace or supplant humanity's consciousness. I think it's a tool we can use to help us, but I just think that it will have some amazing creative abilities, but as much as it becomes a creative, we evolve faster too. So we'll have the capability to continue to express ourselves. I've seen some pretty wild things with some of my recent explorations. I don't know if you saw the backroom stuff, Abhivardhan, that I had done. It's kind of wild. I had taken some 4 images in Dream Machine and just asked the model to add any text that it wanted to. I didn't give it direction. And it started to create this really unique world and was layering in text and telling these stories that I myself wouldn't have necessarily considered. And that was a bit of an interesting moment where I started to unlock the idea of like, oh, wow, there's a lot to explore with contextual understanding of these things. However, if I hadn't sat down and prompted that, it wouldn't have just done that on its own, right? So it goes back to the idea of your consciousness just expresses itself through these things. And I think that that's more my personal attitude on it. And I think hopefully that ramble helps answer that.
Fantastic. Kailash, go ahead. I'll not stop you. I'll not stop you.
I don't have any question.
No worries. I think this is a good exploratory session of sorts also. And as I said, it was more of a sequel to the first one where we had already discussed IP plus culture. So I think this was an interesting blend. Most probably we will have an outcome document out of it. Thank you so much for your inputs and that in this. And yeah, Kiri, thank you for your ideas on AI skills in the creativity side. I might reach out to you later. So, we'll stay in touch. Thank you for enlightening on that. And yeah, Prateek, uh, always grateful to have you. And yeah, more such sessions could be happening at mutual
Yep.
convenience. And we can think about that. Great. So before we wrap up, if anyone has any questions, okay. So Badra shared an article. Maybe I think you can have a look for fun. But yeah. But otherwise, yes. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to chime in. Maybe a minute or two we can wait. But yeah. Uh,
Maybe I'll take that time
also,
to. You said something interesting, right? He said that
hmm,
can generative AI achieve true creativity, or is it merely mimicking patterns, right? So I think he addressed that very well and a big part of it. So there are two things to it, right? It's not sentient yet. When it's a new life form, then yeah, and it has its own embodied experiences, it'll probably be creative. So I think that Kiri answered very well. But the other thing about patterns, right? I don't. Why are patterns bad things? Human beings always make sense of the world around them through pattern recognition and matching. That's literally how we operate. If we did not have the ability to pattern match and derive meaning from it over a long period of time and accumulate that meaning into how a worldview, we would not be able to survive. Patterns are how we understand the world and how we express our understanding of the world. So it's it's the pattern matching and making is still being done by the human being with the aid of a machine that or a tool that probably can get to your level much faster than anything before. But so it's not that patterns are a bad thing by themselves. And second, humans are still using the tool that creates these patterns. They're not being generated by themselves. They're not sentient. They're not autonomous. They're not. Then they don't have agency. And I think that, like to Kiri's point, even when she prompted, say, come up with the text you want, it was her agency that pushed that into that direction. So I think, to me, the answer to that even is an interesting question, but the answer is pretty clear because the human being still drives it. People still drive it all, right? I don't know if Utkarsh that helps.
Can I add something here? Like, I have
please.
read it somewhere. I have read it somewhere. Any of the idea, whether it's from the scientific field, artistic field, or anywhere, it's never new. You take idea from somewhere else and then implement in your idea, right? So if something is done by AI and AI is doing the same thing, so I think we should not question that because humans also do that, the same thing.
Yeah, you're right. Everything. So look, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. We all learn. There are inspirations and specific curiosities and themes we are engaging. But I always like sort of resist this character. AI, it's still the human using AI as a tool versus the AI doing something. It's a simple turn of phrase, but I think it's meaningfully different in what it implies. It's not the AI doing something. It is a human being using an AI tool to do something. And I think that, to me, is the delineation that we're still trying to understand as a culture, because it's such a new tool, it's such a powerful tool, it feels like it's doing everything, right? Actually, it's the human doing the thing, but it's a very, very capable, extremely capable tool, no doubt, and in a way that we've never seen before. So it's easy to conflate the two, but I think as long as we know that it's the human doing and not the AI doing, because the AI doesn't have any intention to do it. It doesn't want to create something by itself. We're telling it to create something, right, as a tool. So I think that in time that will emerge, but right now that's where a lot of the confusion comes also.
Okay. Yeah. So I think at this moment, no questions are coming up. So I think we'll wrap it up. So, Prateek and Kiri, thank you so much for the interventions. Kailash, you did well. Thank you so much for your interventions as well. Um, I just request three of you to just stay for 2 to 3 minutes for feedback once the recording ends, once the session is done. But yeah, I think someone is typing up. But yeah, so I think it was a great session, and we are grateful to everyone who came in. Uh, Timings were a bit late to be finalized, but I'm really happy that a lot of people were passionate about this and wanted to know more and unique perspectives, because I mean, I know so many people in law who discuss about creativity and copyright, but it was so boring. So it's something evolved has to be discussed. So that was the approach here. So we look forward to have these sessions, and once the recording is done, I think we'll have a feedback later. So